You will never win. That was pathetic.
Yeah, I think that should explain how garbage Philadelphia is. Hey, what's going on, everybody? So as the title suggests, I'm going to be doing a little bit of a deep dive on the promising-to-disastrous timeline of the Philadelphia 76ers. Obviously, you can read the title. Yeah, if y'all didn't know, based on the third screenshot with all the stats, those are Ben Simmons' stats from games 4 through 7 of the series against the Atlanta Hawks. And as we all know, the Sixers shit the bed. And now, the future of the 76ers and somewhat of Ben Simmons and somewhat of Joel Embiid, it's in jeopardy. So, now we gotta wonder how the hell it got to this point. And this video will be in similar fashion to what I did with my video about LaMarcus Aldridge and his time with the San Antonio Spurs. If you guys don't know what I'm talking about, you can watch that video for yourselves. It'll be in the link below. But yeah, this video will be in similar fashion to describe the timeline about how the 76ers fell from grace. Let's get right into it. It all started after the 2013-14 season where Michael Carter-Williams was Rookie of the Year, and he had an excellent rookie season, averaging 16, 6, and 6 to go along with 2 steals and damn near a block a game. However, the other lottery pick, Noel, was out for the whole season because of a knee surgery. That all led to a 1963 record for the 2013-14 season, and while Michael Carter-Williams was impressive in his rookie year, it really didn't lead to anything. Like, seriously, it didn't lead to anything but L's in his category. I'm sorry, I just feel like roasting this damn team. Back to our regularly scheduled program. The 2014 NBA draft had the Philadelphia 76ers going 3rd overall, which, lo and behold, enter the 7-1 center you're seeing on my screen right now that I'm controlling, Mr. Joel Embiid himself. However, even after being picked number 3 overall by the Philadelphia 76ers, it was revealed that Embiid, as y'all can read my screen, suffered a broken navicular bone in his foot, which caused him to miss the entire 2014-15 season. And as soon as that season concluded, it was revealed that he had suffered another setback in his recovery after a CT scan revealed that there was less healing than anticipated. And then August 2015, the Sixers ruled him out for basically the entire year. So obviously, within those 2 seasons that Embiid did not play, that led to very horrible seasons. It was enough that the 2014-15 season ended with an 18-64 record, which is 1 less win that they had than the year prior when they had Michael Carter-Williams. 2014-15, they traded him to Milwaukee, and yeah, the 76ers were basically filled with nobodies outside of Embiid, maybe except for, I don't know, Glenn Robinson III, because I've raved about him on this channel before in my Warriors vids. But either way, that 2014-15 season ended up landing them the number 3 overall pick again, which they used that pick to draft Jahlil Okafor. Now to this day, I still don't know why the hell they want to select Jahlil Okafor, because yes, he did have a decent rookie year, averaging 17.5 a game. He only had 7 rebounds, and his efficiency was not that good, and his defense was really not that good either. And even averaging 17 points as a rookie was impressive in and of itself. That shit was not going to last because of the fact that Joel Embiid was going to return the following season anyway. And I'm going to talk about that, and that's when we'll get started talking about the timeline of this 76er team and how they fell from grace. But going back to Jahlil Okafor, those 17 points a game did not matter because it was on a really garbage Philadelphia 76er team, and similar to Michael Carter-Williams, it really wasn't translating to wins. And also, Ben and Joel were going to be the focal point of the offense, and there was really no spot for Jahlil Okafor in Philly at the end of the day. Oh, and I also forgot to point out that the 2015-16 season was a horrible year for the 76ers. Now that I look at it, if I'm a Sixer fan, I would much rather prefer that than being a first seed in the East and losing because your second best player can't shoot the ball or he doesn't want to shoot the ball. But again, We're not going to talk about that. That's way too early in the video. Well, I guess y'all know what I'm trying to say. But anyways, the 2015-16 season was a disaster for the Philadelphia 76ers in and of itself because of the fact that despite Jahlil Okafor averaging 17 a game, it only contributed to 10 wins out of 82 games, and it landed them the number 1 pick in the NBA draft, which they used that pick in 2016 to draft Ben Simmons out of LSU. Ben was one of the most hyped up prospects, or if not the most hyped up prospect in that 2016 draft, because a lot of people were comparing him to that of, let's say, a LeBron James or Magic Johnson, because he's tall, he can play the point, he's very fast, and he could barrel his way to the rim, similar to what LeBron can do. And he was alright in his summer league games. He averaged 11 points, 8 rebounds, and 5.5 assists, but after the summer league, it was revealed that in September of 2016, it was apparent that he rolled his right ankle during a 76ers final training camp scrimmage. Again, y'all can read this off my screen. After receiving an x-ray and the MRI of the foot and ankle, it was revealed that Simmons had a 5th metatarsal bone in his right foot that was fractured, and he was then ruled out for the entire 2016-17 NBA season because it was revealed that Simmons had a broken right foot that had not fully healed yet. So the 2016-17 season was just Joel Embiid by himself, and we would have to wait a year to see the duo of Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid. But the 2016-17 season showed a lot of promise with this Sixer team because in his debut, Joel Embiid recorded 20 points, 7 rebounds, and 2 losses in a 103-97 loss against the Oklahoma City Thunder. And unfortunately, his season was cut short because it was revealed that he had a torn meniscus in his right knee. But in the games he did play, which was 31 games in that 2016-17 season, he only averaged 25 minutes, but he averaged 20 points a game and 8 rebounds and 2 blocks a game. This gave a lot of Philly fans hope because they felt like they drafted one of the more dominant centers at the time, and they felt like this is the guy that we can win with. Alright, bet. Now with all that out of the way, now we can talk about the timeline of Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid. 2017-18, the Simmons-Embiid era begins. Ben Simmons eventually made his debut on October 18, 2017, where he recorded 18 points, 10 rebounds, 5 assists, a block, and 2 steals, all in 35 minutes of action. However, they lost that game 120-115, and they started off the season 1-4, which did raise some concern. While they did struggle early on in the year, Simmons eventually had a breakout month in the month of November, where he had a 19-point game with 13 rebounds and 9 assists, a 22-point game with 12 rebounds and 4 assists with a block and a steal. Unfortunately, he had 5 personal fouls that game. A 27-point game versus the Utah Jazz. He had 10 rebounds and 4 steals that game. And he finally had a breakout game against the Washington Wizards a month later, where he had 31 points, 18 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 blocks, and 2 steals, all within 41 minutes of action. In that month of November, Philly did improve their record from what it was in October of 2017, but even then it did raise some concerns and it raised some skepticism about Ben Simmons as a player, where a lot of people, Stephen A. Smith and I think Magic Johnson included, and Tracy McGrady and a lot of these former NBA players and analysts, they said that Ben Simmons is a jump shot away from being a LeBron James type of player or being the next LeBron or whatever the hell you want to call him. But even then, despite Ben having a breakout month, he had stretches where he would have 5 points, 7 points, 8 points, basically games under 10 points, which did raise levels of concern of his ability to be at least consistent with his shots. Because one game he would have 27 points and the next game he would have 7 points, as I'm looking at my screen right now. So it did raise some concern about this Philadelphia 76er team on if they were to be frauds if they ever entered the playoffs. While Joel Embiid missing some ball games did not help their cause, because remember, he only missed 19 of those 82 ball games in that 2017-18 season, it really didn't help his cause at all. And in December, they had a record of 5-10, which is pretty bad if you're considered a championship contender. But going into the new year, The Sixers were able to somewhat turn around. They were 5-1 at home in January, but they were 7-5. In the month of February, they were 8-3. And then after the All-Star break, the Sixers really started to play like contenders. While Ben Simmons didn't have the greatest production offensively, if you want to talk about scoring, his impact on the floor outside of it was a major reason on why they were winning ball games after the All-Star break. During the month of March, basically the last 2 months, the Sixers were 20-3, and Ben Simmons' impact, as well as the scoring that they got from JJ Redick and Joel Embiid, that was a huge part on why they were the 3rd seed in the East, and they were argued to be championship contenders at that point. After their great end to the regular season in 2018, their record overall was 52-30. That earned them the 3rd seed, and they entered the playoffs facing the 6th seed in Miami Heat. Now, I can tell y'all right now, after looking at his stats from the Celtics series and then later on against Brooklyn, Toronto, and obviously Philly and Washington, which I'm going to get to that later in the video, I can conclude, and a lot of NBA fans can conclude, that this series against Miami was Ben's best playoff series or playoff performance or whatever you want to call it. So in that series, Ben averaged 18 a game with 10 rebounds and 9 assists, averaging 2 steals a game. He even got, despite the fact the Sixers lost game 2 of that series, Ben played really well. He had 24 points, 9 rebounds, 8 assists, 2 blocks, but he had 4 steals the following 2 games. While he wasn't the greatest offensive player, he only scored 19 and 17 in the next 2 games. He did provide some solid defense, solid rebounding, as well as solid playmaking. And then obviously, with that being considered, that Sixer team basically shut down Miami. Oh, and I forgot to mention, because I'm trying to make this about the Sixers, not just Ben Simmons, but I'm talking about the Simmons and Embiid duo specifically. Joel Embiid missed the past 3 weeks during that season, including games 1 and 2 versus Miami with an orbital bone fracture, but even when he returned, he did not play all that well in the first round. He played a lot better in round 2 versus Boston. I'm going to get into that in a minute, but Philly won in spite of that. And Philly not only won that series against Miami because of Ben Simmons' impact and his presence within the series, he also got contributions from JJ Redick as well. He scored 28 games, shooting 35% from 3. Marco Bellinelli was awesome in that series. Dario Saric was pretty good. Joel Embiid, again, he didn't play all that well. But like I said, the Sixers won in spite of Embiid being out for the first 2 games and not playing all that well. Now, let's move on to round 2 versus Boston, as y'all can see here. Round 2 versus Boston was a much different story than it was in Miami because Boston's defense was dedicated to building a wall around both Embiid, but mostly Simmons. Because of the fact that we know good and well Ben Simmons cannot shoot, he ended up being a liability despite what the stats tell you. That Boston defense was set up to keep Ben from attacking the paint. Now, he averaged 14.4 in that series, and 4 of those 5 games, he averaged 17.7, based on what I calculated at least. But in game 2, he had 1 point. Really wasn't contributing much. 0 for 4 from the field, 1 or 2 from the free throw line, and he really didn't impact the game at all. He was basically a black hole out there. And to sum it up, despite the fact he still averaged double digits and he still had some nice plays and nice defensive plays, the Sixers still struggled on offense because of the fact that Ben Simmons cannot shoot. And it didn't help matters that Jason Tatum was also killing them, as well as Scary Terry Rozier. Tatum averaged almost 24 a game, while Rozier averaged 19. But what stood out in that series was how they defended Simmons and how they basically dared Embiid to score over 3 defenders. Now, to Embiid's credit, he played a lot better than he did in the series against Miami, but he only averaged 23 a game, and that basically proved my point. And I was watching the highlights, and I watched the full games along with it too. Y'all can judge for yourself if you really want to watch them. The Sixers basically had no other offensive weapon. Like, I know Dario Saric played well. He averaged 18 a game, and JJ Redick averaged 16 a game, but your second best player cannot be the 4th best player when it comes to points scored. Y'all know what I mean? And the saddest part is that they obviously won game 4, but that was when they were down 3-0. 3 of those 4 games after game 1 were in the Sixers' hands, basically. But again, they couldn't stop Tatum and they couldn't stop Terry Rozier, and the Celtics' defense was too good, and Philly collapsed as a result. And they had a very, very bad turnover at the end of game 5, where I think it was Simmons inbounding the ball. He tried a full court heave it when it was a 2-point lead, and it was intercepted, and it was basically good night Sixers from there. So, yeah, the 2017-18 Philadelphia 76ers looked like it had a lot of promise, and it really did have a disappointing end, but a lot of fans did have hope that Simmons and Embiid were going to get better as the years progressed. 2018-2019, the Jimmy Butler experience. Alright, bro, I'm guessing everybody knew what happened in that 2018-19 season when it came to this Philadelphia 76er team. The 7-game series against Toronto, the little internal conflicts, which turned out to be a huge deal than we thought. I mean, y'all get what I mean, but I'm just going to do some revisionist history or whatever you call it, because this is a deep dive and I'm talking about the timeline of this Philly team, etc., etc., etc. So let's get right into it. So Philly initially planned on running it back with the same roster, and obviously prior to the Jimmy Butler trade, they only had 2 notable additions to the squad. Number 1 was shooter Landry Shamet, who they got from Wichita State. They drafted him, and then I believe they signed Wilson Chandler, or they traded for Wilson Chandler, you know what I mean? Oh yeah, and this is something Philly's gonna regret as well. They traded Mikal Bridges to the Phoenix Suns for Zaire Smith. And then the Sixers had a really decent start to the 2018-19 campaign, but on November 12, 2018, they traded Jared Bayless, Robert Covington, and Dario Saric, as well as a 2022 second-round draft pick, to get Jimmy Butler from the Minnesota Timberwolves. And rightfully so, they were expected to be a title contender with this move. It was clear that the Sixers were in win-now mode, not rebuild and wait for the next 5 years. And as a result, both Ben and Joel had their best season as pros. Well, that was until Joel Embiid's breakout year this year, but at the time, he has best season with Jimmy Butler as well as Ben Simmons. Joel averaged 27 a game, Ben averaged 16.4. And if that ain't enough firepower for Philly, at the trade deadline, they ended up trading Landry Shamet and Wilson Chandler to get Tobias Harris from the LA Clippers. Tobias Harris had his best season as a pro, averaging 20 a game, shooting 50, 40, 90. And with this move itself, with Jimmy Butler, Ben Simmons, and Joel Embiid, you add Harris, and they were basically expected to win it all. Not to be second round exits, cough, cough, but they were up there along with the Golden State Warriors, the Houston Rockets, the Milwaukee Bucks, and the Toronto Raptors. Knock on wood, by the way. Now, interestingly enough, even with all these moves, they were 51-31 in the East, which is still a good record, but to put it into context, y'all, they were 1 win worse than what they were last year before Jimmy Butler and Tobias Harris. So I'm not saying that the trade made them worse, but it did raise a lot of skepticism with this Philadelphia team in terms of if they're going to win it all or not. But despite all of that, there were still high expectations for this Philadelphia team when it came to the playoffs. In the first round, they made light work of the Brooklyn Nets, but what stood out in that series was, despite the fact Jimmy Butler underperformed, I know he had 36 in game 1, but that was basically it. The thing that stood out the most was Joel Embiid playing really well, averaging 25 and 13, and he had 6 blocks in game 4 along with 2 steals. And Ben Simmons had his second best playoff series. In game 4, which was his best game of the playoffs, period, he had 31 points, but he only had 4 rebounds and 9 assists, but he was making plays on the defensive end with 2 steals and 3 blocks. So despite Jimmy Butler struggling in that series, the Sixers roster was too much for that young Nets team. Remember, this was the Nets before KD and Kyrie and James Harden. So obviously they were going to struggle against Philadelphia, and Philly made light work of them. Now let's get to the series of the century, or what was argued to be the series of the century until the Bucks-Nets series 2 years later, the Sixers-Raptors series. So that series was the definition of back and forth, and they had to face Kawhi Leonard, who was basically a 30-point per game monster that entire playoff run. However, that series exposed how overrated that Sixer team was, because despite the fact Jimmy Butler averaged 22 a game, he was bearing the responsibility on defense. Their second leading scorer, Tobias Harris, or their fourth option, Tobias Harris, I should say, really struggled. JJ Redick was not good. Ben Simmons really struggled. Joel Embiid really dropped off in the second round because the Raptors defense was similar to the Boston defense, which it basically limited Simmons' ability to scan the floor, and it really limited Joel Embiid as well. And also to take into account that in that Game 7 versus Game 7 versus Toronto, there were 3 plays where Philly was way too stagnant on offense. They had 2 consecutive shot clock violations, and I'm surprised that they kept it close, but Toronto was not that great in that Game 7 either. But even then, that series was back and forth. Was it going to be about Ben Simmons and Jimmy Butler, or was it going to be about Kawhi Leonard? And obviously, in that Game 7, and trigger warning if you're a Sixer fan, this happened. Kawhi shoots a fading 2-pointer to end the Sixers season, and what made that more epic was that it took 4 bounces for that shot to go in. So in hindsight, it was initially looked at as a really successful season, because literally a lot of fans made the argument that if that Kawhi shot had not went in, that game would have went into overtime, and who knows, maybe Philadelphia won that game. So it was looked at as a successful season in that aspect, and they could have ran it back the next year too. But here's another interesting thing. Jimmy Butler discussed this with JJ Redick on his podcast the day before the shutdown with the virus. Jimmy Butler basically explained why he left Philadelphia. Now, during that 2018-19 season, despite the fact it was very successful, again in hindsight, there was a lot of conflict between Jimmy and the Philadelphia 76ers and their coaching staff, and the fact that during one of their practices, they had a film session which they didn't really walk through anything, and they basically said, hey guys, let's go practice. And Jimmy was like, man, that was pointless. Now, I ain't gonna spoil too much here for y'all. I will link that clip from the podcast in the description below. But I will say this, that both Jimmy and JJ knew that they wanted to leave the Sixers because they're meeting with Elton Brand, and just the vibe in Philly and their front office did not sit right with either of them. So it was in their best interest to leave. And that leads us to the 2019-20 season, which was a nightmare year in Philly. Now, my first video talked about the Tobias Harris trade, and I basically brought up what happened in the 2019-20 season. You guys can go check that out for yourselves. But I'm going to reiterate the same talking points in this video. So, after the 2018-19 campaign, like I said, they lose Jimmy Butler and JJ Redick. And what do? Not only they gave Ben Simmons a max contract and Joel Embiid a max contract as well, they also spent nearly $300 million on Tobias Harris, who got 4 years, $180 million, and they gave Al Horford 4 years and $109 million. Yeah, I ain't gonna explain that, man. Like, let that laugh speak for itself. But anyways, they signed those guys to a combined $289 million for 4 years each. But they also got Josh Richardson from Miami as part of the sign and trade with Jimmy Butler, because remember, Jimmy signed with Miami and Miami had to let go of Josh Richardson as a result. But the issue with the 2019-20 roster, I think everybody and their mother saw it, was that they had no shooter outside of Tobias Harris. Sure, they had Mike Scott and they traded for Alec Burks and Glenn Robinson III, but it really was not helping their cause by any means, given that Tobias was basically their only 3-point threat. Josh Richardson was a really nice shooter, and a really good shot creator, but he was not that great of a shooter. He was basically league average at best. Joel Embiid obviously can shoot, but the thing is, that's not his game, nor it shouldn't have been his game. And we all know who Ben Simmons is. He just can't shoot a lick from outside. So that Philly team from 2019-20 was a straight up mess. Yeah, they were the best home team in the regular season, but again, that was before the shutdown with the virus. And we all know what happens from there. They struggle in the bubble, and then they get swept by Boston. Yeah, I don't need to explain how trash that Philly team was. Oh yeah, and also, while Simmons basically had the same type of year without Jimmy Butler in 2019-2020, where he averaged 16 a game, Joel Embiid really struggled. And also, even if Ben was present in the series against Boston, he would not have made that much of a difference anyway, because that defense was set up against him as well had he played. And Joel Embiid was pretty good in the series against Boston, but again, that roster and that team and the way the offense was constructed was just a complete mess, and they fired Brett Brown as a result. Last but not least, 2020-2021, the downfall of the Philadelphia 76ers. Now, I've already talked about how the Sixers went out sad and terrible in my series recap vid, and I already talked about some positive things that the Sixers did last offseason with acquiring Danny Green and Dwight Howard. But I'm just going to reiterate some of the points from those two videos into this one, so that way y'all know what the hell was up with the Sixers team this season. And I'm laughing because it's just like, it's so sad and terrible how they went out, but it's so hilarious at the same time. But let's just get to it anyway. After the firing of Brett Brown, they hired Doc Rivers, whom was the same coach that was part of that Clippers team that blew a 3-1 lead to the Denver Nuggets while losing a 16, 19, and 12-point lead within those said 3 games. Other moves that they made during last year's offseason was that they acquired Seth Curry from the Dallas Mavericks for Josh Richardson, which was a really good trade in and of itself because Seth Curry's a really good shooter, and I think in Ben's words during the training camp, he could use him the same way he has used Dario Saric, JJ Redick, and Marco Bellinelli in the past. And during an interview on First Take with Stephen A. Smith, Doc Rivers said that, look, I'm going to use Ben Simmons the way I use Rajon Rondo, because just like Ben, he is not one to shoot the ball that well, but he can do other things and impact the game outside of scoring. That did not really age well. But over time, if Ben Simmons did develop that confidence, he could be a bigger, taller version of Rondo. And at the time, again, it made a lot of sense. But however, this year, Ben averaged 14 a game with 6 rebounds, 7 assists, a steal a game, and a block a game. Joel Embiid, on the other hand, averaged 28.5 a game, shooting 51% from the field, 37% from 3, and 85% from the free throw line, which was really impressive because he went back to what he was under Coach Brett Brown in 2018-19, where he averaged 27 a game. Seth Curry, Danny Green, Dwight Howard, and Matisse Thybulle were really solid assets for this team, Danny and Seth being really great shooters, Howard being the backup big that they wanted, and Matisse Thybulle being an all-NBA defender. Also, Tobias Harris was back to who he was when he was with the LA Clippers under Doc Rivers. Again, he averaged 20 a game, or in this case, 19.5 a game, shooting 50, 40, 90. And because of all that, minus Ben Simmons just being average, the 76ers were first seed in the East, and I said in my Bucks video that Philly was much better than Milwaukee, which obviously that was proven to be false, but I'll get to that when I get to that. And I said that Milwaukee had a puncher's chance in comparison to Brooklyn and Philly. Again, I was wrong about that as well. But at the time, a lot of people, myself included, expected the 76ers to be championship contenders, and rightfully so. And things were really starting to look up for Philly after they took a commanding 3-0 lead against Russell Westbrook, Bradley Beal, and the Washington Wizards. However, in Game 4 of that series, 2 things have happened. Number 1, Joel Embiid had a slight tear in his meniscus. And number 2, which is the most notable one, the Wizards utilized a hack of Ben strategy, which utilized how weak Ben Simmons' free throw shooting is because of the fact that he has never been a good shooter, let alone a good free throw shooter. And after Game 4, Doc Rivers had the audacity, the nerve, the gall even, to tell reporters straight to their face that, hey, let me know that I should sub out Ben Simmons just because of his free throw shooting. That way it reminds me, look, man, I know y'all don't know basketball if you think I should take him out of the game. Again, did not age well. But hey, no worries, bro. They were able to handle their business against the Washington Wizards, eliminating them in Game 5, winning that series 4-1. Now, in Game 1 versus Atlanta, they were down by as much as 26, and while it looked bad for a while, Philly actually attempted a comeback. And keep in mind, y'all, I predicted this series to be 4-1 or at least 4-2 because Atlanta was a tough team, but I didn't feel like that they were this good. So let's break it down. They lost the first game 128 to 124, and they won the next two pretty handily, 118-102, game 3, 127-111. And it looked like the series was over in game 4, where they were up 18. I forgot what the score was, but that ended up being a 3-point loss in game 4, 103 to 100. And then they led, I think, 46 to 7 or 72 to 46, excuse me again. And then they led 81 to 56. Surely nothing could go wrong there, right?
Psych!
The Sixers will blow a 26-point lead and lose that game 109 to 106. And I am still stunned that they were able to win Game 6 in Atlanta, to which I was thinking that, oh my goodness, this series is going back to Philadelphia. Philly has learned from their mistakes by now, and surely they cannot blow a Game 7. And it started looking that way when, after they fell down by 7 to end the third quarter, they went up by 4 twice, and I just thought, man, Philly might take this series. And what happens next? Ben Simmons passes up a wide open dunk to Matisse Thybulle because he thought Gallinari was going to foul him, and Trae Young was the only person underneath the basket. You can't make this shit up, bro. And that was one of many dumb plays down the stretch in that Game 7 that cost the Sixers, obviously, that series. Now, after Tobias Harris decided to come in clutch with some crucial, timely shots, Matisse Thybulle swipes Kevin Huerter in the head, which gave him 3 free throws, and obviously, because Huerter had a hot hand that game, he had 27 points. They were able to go up by 4, and Joel Embiid thought, in the words of Skip Bayless, he was Kevin Durant. He tried to dribble through traffic, and he got stripped by Gallinari. Gallinari gets a breakaway dunk, and the score is 98 to 92, and I think everybody knows what happens from there. Also, I did not discuss this in my series recap. Doc Rivers played 10 players in a Game 7, which is really unacceptable because you have to shrink your rotations at that point, because your best players, especially your starting 5 and somewhat of your 6-man, had to play at least 40 plus minutes. But yeah, man, Philly played dumb basketball, and Ben Simmons was the biggest liability on that court. Now, let's keep this in perspective. He's considered an all-star, but he is a liability on the offensive end. Defensively, he was fine, and facilitating the offense, he was pretty decent. But when his team needed him to score, he passed up the ball at half court to Joel Embiid, or even passed the ball to a cutting Matisse Thybulle when he had a wide open dunk, and everybody and their moms was like, what the hell are you doing? And the post-game interviews were really, really alarming because Joel Embiid said that particular play that I just discussed was the turning point in the game. And Doc Rivers said that, I don't know if we can win with Ben Simmons as our main point guard, which is typically something you would not say as a head coach, especially during losses like this. But yeah, I'm not going to repeat everything I said in my series recap vid. Just go watch that vid for yourself. But all I'm saying is this: the Sixers, who were supposed to be championship contenders, ended up looking like frauds. And because of the fact it looked like they lost their way, they lost the series as a result. So now, in conclusion, it's all about what happens to this 76er team now. Well, as we all know, Philly is a mess. They got Andre Drummond and George Niang, which as a Laker fan, Andre Drummond was not that good, and George Niang, from what I hear from a lot of Utah Jazz fans, he was ass. So Philly did not really get any better, and they did not become championship contenders, and I highly doubt that they would even make a third seed at least. But the interesting case is that Ben Simmons is more than likely going to be traded. That relationship, as I showed y'all at the beginning of the video, was really stained. He did not want to return calls to Joel Embiid, and he basically parted ways with Philly before Philly even let him go. It's similar to the situation with James Harden and the Rockets earlier this year. So what happens now with this Philadelphia 76er team? Well, they need to get a point guard that can help maximize Joel Embiid's window of winning a championship, because even though Joel Embiid, I think he's 30 now, or he's close to being 30, but his injury history suggests that he might have 40-year-old knees or something like that. That makes enough sense. So because of Joel Embiid's history, Ben Simmons is only going to hold back any title chances that this man will win. So if I'm Philly, I'm trading Ben Simmons. I know they're trying to talk to other teams right now, but it's best that they move on from him and get a much more proven point guard, or at least a point guard that's not afraid to shoot the ball and that can knock down free throws as well. Now, I don't know how the hell they're going to do that. I would suggest trading for John Wall, but the problem is, as much as I love Wall, the dude gets injured almost every other game, so him and Embiid would not, on paper it would be great, but given their injury history, it would not turn out well because of their injury. So yeah, I don't know where Philly goes from here, man, because they're just screwed with the payroll between Simmons, Harris, and Embiid, and I think they still have Al Horford's contract and they're still paying him. This Philly franchise is basically screwed, and there's really nothing we can do about it, and there's really nothing the front office can do about it. So I'm sorry to all my Sixer fans out there that are watching this video. It's a sad time for y'all, but who knows? Maybe y'all could turn around in like 5 years or such. But yeah, man. Anyways, that's the end of this video. It took a lot of time in editing, and I'm sorry to you guys if I have not uploaded as consistently as I wanted to, but that's because I've been busy with work and I've been busy with school as well, so that has been holding me back a bit, but I promise I will be getting videos out as soon as I'm able to. But until then, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and share this video because I put a lot of time and effort into this one, and I just hope you guys enjoy it. And I hope you enjoyed me slandering the Sixer team and Ben Simmons and all those guys. But yeah, thank you guys for watching again. That's the end of this video. I'm X. Deuces. Oh yeah, one more thing. It all started with Kawhi, and Trae Young finished the job. All right, that's it. Appreciate y'all.